Hello, everybody. Dan Goodstein here. Welcome to Automation Nation Sales Strategies Edition. I'm Dan Goodstein. I head up IRPA AI. I'm joined today by Frank Casale and Ahson Pai. We have a great discussion for you around Chat GPT. Before we jump in, Frank, just do a brief intro on yourself for the few people in the world that don't know you, and then we'll go to Ahson as well.
Oh my gosh, why me first? First of all, I'm in a car, Dan. I pulled over just to make sure I'm in a predictable environment, but I have to tell you, I was driving through a very exclusive neighborhood and I'm parking in a spot here and with the car running. So if somebody comes and taps on the window, a policeman, security guard, it will just add to this discussion. But nonetheless, thanks for inviting me, and good to see my colleague and my longtime friend Ahson on the line. It should be interesting. My background is, if you go all the way back, it's in boring stuff like outsourcing. That was kind of cool at the time. Go back 10 years, RPA and intelligent automation. And more recently, I like, my colleague here is very much focused, not solely, but a good portion of my time, 70+% of my time is focused on GPT, generative AI, kind of these large language models, and their impact, both on large companies, mid-sized companies, and new ventures, if you will. So looking forward to seeing what you have in store for us.
Sounds good. And Ahson?
Great. Thanks very much. Pleasure to be here. I appreciate the opportunity, Dan, Frank, to speak with you and the audience. Basically, I think, look, just to kind of go through my background very quickly, I've spent a number of years in the consulting space in banking, financial services. Most recently at Cognizant, prior to that, EXL, and then EY, KPMG, SunGard. A lot of the things that we've been focused on more recently has been how do you drive outcomes? And I think that's kind of been the main area of focus, looking at customer experience, design thinking, as well as data to drive insights. And then how do you shorten the innovation cycles, ultimately reducing in the lower cost of operations and improving a compliance and regulatory risk and compliance profile. So I think a lot of the things that we're going to talk about today have to do with the nuances of implementing generative AI. And I think, while there is a lot of promise, navigating the nuances of public-private data, looking at ways to where you can look at the large language models that are publicly available versus the ones that need to be made and created internally. I think a lot of those types of discussions are where the industry is moving, finding ways to realize real value while at the same time leveraging the publicly available data and private data sets as well. So very much looking forward to this conversation with the both of you.
Yeah, thanks for joining us. And Ahson, let me stay with you for a second. This has been a very exciting a few months in the marketplace. Frank kind of joked about starting in some of the more boring stuff, and then we had the RPA explosion almost 10 years ago now, and the last few years after that, maybe some AI excitement, which seemed like it kind of dulled for a few years. And then this Chat GPT thing last fall. What's your sense of kind of just overall where the market is and where it's headed?
Well, I think like a lot of hype cycles, it's kind of understanding where the real value is. And I think you've touched upon some good things. And, Frank, you mentioned it as well. The way I kind of look at this is we've had the RPA wave a few years ago, and that was really focusing on the workflow. And where there were some areas where, you had some limitations with RPA is how do you generate outbound communication? Right, and contextual outbound communication. So be that as it may, automating the workflow, the actual steps of work that need to be done throughout any process. Obviously, in this call, we're going to be talking about the sales process. But one aspect of it is how do you generate the outbound communications? The second aspect, now when you look at things like generative AI and everything that's happened with Chat GPT, this has kind of been the Super Bowl commercial for AI, right? And it's gotten everybody's attention. Now, how do you take what is happening and all of the things that are happening? At the end of the day, it's a text-based chat model, Chat GPT, obviously. But then when you apply it to video and audio and other aspects, and you broaden generative AI capabilities outside of just text, I think the possibilities become a lot more far-reaching. But the idea is really around For this to be valuable to organizations without giving away proprietary information, whether that's from a sales perspective or software development for that matter, leveraging what is publicly available and then also linking that with what is private data, which is customer data. I think a lot of that is where the industry is sort of struggling right now. Now, from a banking perspective and the regulated industries, insurance, healthcare, I think navigating the nuances of private and public data privacy regulations as well is going to be critical, and having a quarterback to be able to implement this in a way in which a quarterbacking approach to implement this is going to be where this is all going to land. Short comment at the end here, it's really going to be a no different from what happened with the cloud adoption. In the beginning, don't want to move to the cloud, data is too precious. Second part of this was really around, well, we need to get to the cloud. Now where that's being looked at is how do we realize value from the cloud? Public and private implementations of LLMs, training of the models, availability of data, tuning and training and maintaining the models is really going to be critical. Doing that on the public side, linking that with the private side and managing that together, I think is ultimately where we're going to see some results and the broader adoption at the enterprise level.
Frank, what's your sense? You've spotted these trends for a long time. You're known in the industry for kind of spotting these things, ahead of the curve. First with outsourcing, then with RPA, Web3, and NFTs, and now I know you're doing a lot around generative AI. So what's your sense of the hype versus reality, and what's going to happen over the next 12, 18 months?
Well, I'm getting a brain freeze with how many things I want to say, so I'll do my best to keep it tight. First of all, I like what Ahson mentioned as far as a quarterback. That's very interesting. I think that's a great point. Ahson, you'd be a great quarterback. Ahson, you get your shoulder pads.
I got to work on my shoulders.
You got to get the shoulder pads and the helmet and just get ready and loosen that arm up. I really actually, people like you would be great quarterbacks. I think that's a great concept. So on one hand, I want to say this is new, revolutionary, very cool, very real. On the other hand, I want to say many of us will finally be able to do what we've always wanted to do. Mm-hmm. So in the spring of 1994, Sloan Management Review published this article called around core competency. They introduced the concept of core competency, and some of you may recall this if you're an older guy like me and you were at a desk with a suit at the time. But the concept was companies should focus on, should identify their core competency, and that's what they should focus on. And then anything else should be up for grabs, meaning outsource it, right? So if you're Nike, why would you spend billions of dollars dedicated to IT? Focus on the brand, focus on design, right? If you're a hospital, why would you be spending all this money on a call center? Whatever it may be, right? So this concept of core competency, focusing on what it is you do and not be distracted by the distractions. Meaning time distraction, mind share distraction, funding distraction. Well, outsourcing did some of that back then, but was very, very tactical. So then fast forward to, RPA, and there was this concept of, hey, let's automate tasks, free people up to do what they want to do, allow them to move beyond the mundane, tactical, boring, robotic stuff. And that worked. That kind of somewhat worked, took one more bite out of the sandwich, if you will, but still no revolutionary impact. What we have here now is we have something that is extremely powerful. It's extremely cheap or free for many. And I know Ahson is going to pounce on me because I know it's more complicated in the enterprise world. I get that. But for the standpoint of, for the first time ever, individuals, startups, freelancers, side hustlers will have access to something that is as powerful as the enterprises will have. However, they will not get stuck with all the things that Ahson mentioned before. They're not going to be too worried about guardrails and IP. I mean, they should be a somewhat, but there's not going to be this 6-month lag where you got to run this through, the gauntlet of getting everybody to approve it. I know thousands of people right now that have downloaded, they're on it, and they're doing all sorts of things. I won't steal thunder of the main purpose of this discussion now. So what I think we have here is unprecedented. I think it's powerful. I do agree, and maybe this is for a different discussion, that the enterprises need to proceed quickly but cautiously. I would say fearless but not reckless. Um, but I think this is significant. I think the key is for everybody to keep up with it. One last thing, Dan, just before I jumped on this call, I posted to LinkedIn something that I refer to as the reverse hype lag, meaning in my 30 years in emerging tech, this is the first time I've ever seen the exact opposite of hype. Meaning typically, right, the hype is ahead of the reality, right? Everybody's talking about how awesome something's going to be, autonomous vehicles, RPA, cloud in the early days before it ultimately, clicks, if it ever does. Here, the reality for what I see of people using it hands-on, the reality, outcome, ROI, like just real magical, like holy cow kind of results. I see the exact opposite. I see the reality way ahead of people catching on to what these capabilities really are. So that to me is kind of a pretty significant as well. But nonetheless, that's what I feel. I am excited, as you could tell, and I'm looking forward to covering a specific use case of sales. If that's your intent today, Dan Goodstein.
Yeah, so you hit on something there, and Ahson, you made some good points about the enterprise grade level version of this thing. But my questions have been really along the lines that Frank was mentioning, because if you think about AI as it was 2 years ago, 3 years ago, we spoke to a lot of members who were trying to grasp the capabilities and how this thing worked. And one of the big issues I think for providers was it was kind of this black box, right? Of, hey, trust us, it works. Trust us, we're going to get you value out of it, but we can't really show you what's under the hood because it's proprietary. Now it's democratized, right? Anybody can go online and just start playing with this thing and at least figure out some of the value. So, I'm curious your thoughts, Ahson. From a big company perspective, is this ultimately a death by 1,000 cuts of all these guys in a garage trying to kind of cannibalize the business? Or do you feel that there's really a big differentiator that a large company can bring to this?
Oh, hands down, the latter, right? I think there are differentiators, and industries are ultimately going to get more specialized. On the corporate side, just like we saw with digital transformation, it is winner takes all, right? So I think there is an opportunity to companies that do this right will realize quicker conversion rates. They will lower their cost of sales, and they will improve their volume and velocity in the sales funnel at the same dollar cost and at the same unit time. In terms of getting, if you look at time value of every dollar spent per unit time, you'll get a lot more output if you're leveraging this capability in the right way. Just to kind of oversimplify the conversation, if you look at a sales funnel, identify, qualify, pursue, and then close whatever you're selling. And you put metrics around those things. Identify, well, how many deals do you have at the top of the funnel, and then what are the ones that you are, qualifying, and then the smaller part is in terms of driving those to pursuit, and then ultimately driving them to closure. If you think about where a lot of sales energy goes in, and a lot of times where you start seeing leading problems in sales is in the identify side. So that's analytics, it's data, it's obviously some use of AI, specialty use of AI as well. But customer outreach, absolutely something that's a game changer. Think about the customized letters you can now write to customers, customized emails, even voice communications, which you could have with customers, and you could have a phone call conversation and have an AI interface with the back end, not even have a human on the other side of it for simpler sales right now. That'll even get more sophisticated over time. So outreach, outbound communication, absolutely going to give you a lot of efficiency on the identify side, because that's no longer going to be manual. It's no longer going to be driven by human labor. And then, as you get to pursuing or qualifying questions, the urgency, identifying the customer need, obviously with the simpler sales first, and then it'll become more and more complex over time. And then ultimately driving where you can now repurpose a lot of your sales energies into the final stages to pursue and close and close more sales. I think looking at it from that perspective, there's absolutely some game changing information. The other point that I'll mention, the second point, Dan, is if you look at regulated industries, let's use financial services, for example, going out there and saying in a certain zip code, in New York or California, what is the average income and what's the average age and what are the professions that certain people are in and how can I target them? That's publicly available data. We can do that today. It's a simple API call integrating, OpenAI's Chat GPT Model 3.5 or 4.0 is an afternoon's exercise. But then linking that to say, I need to look at my customer data to know their balances, what they bought, how many accounts they have, where they're structured, are they high net worth or mass affluent or very high net worth? That's going to take a little bit of time because now you're getting into privacy of data. But to the extent that you can leverage publicly available data, absolutely something that's going to drive efficiency in the sales process. And Frank, I'm going to springboard off of your comment as well. Core competency absolutely applies here. It's like a non-depletable resource. I'm going back to my 20 plus years ago in MBA classes, right? It's not like gas or energy or dollars in the bank that are depletable resources. Anything that is something that gets better with use, better with time, is ultimately going to be a core competency. And organizations that can leverage this, train these models, make them more efficient, have them do more complex sales, identify insights to figure out, ways to go after more profitable customer demographics, which might be hidden, or pivoting on products that might be more profitable. All of those things are going to drive a tremendous amount of value. So absolutely, at the end of the day, you got to look at it like we're Sears, we're trying to become Amazon. How do we do that overnight? You've got to have a strategy to do that. And I think, these types of technologies are going to be catalysts to drive that journey.
Frank, you and I have always had this discussion and debate about the art versus the science of sales, right? What Ahson's saying is, and I agree. There's so much value in ChatGPT and things like it to really enhance the sales process. I saw a stat this week that there's some predictions that ChatGPT in sales and marketing is already increasing lead flow by 50%, reducing call times by 60-70%. So you're starting to see the melding of the science with the art of sales, Frank.
Oh boy. Well, let me get to that. I'm not sure. Let me tell you how I see it, guys. So I see it much more simplistically, and not replacing what you are both saying, but maybe adding to it. The average salesperson probably spends, depending on the field you're in, probably spends 50% of their time selling. So now think of what that means. If you're a salesperson and you're looking to do more sales, well, I have an idea. If there's something that gets you to spend 60 or 70 or 80% of your time selling, then I think you're going to be interested in this. So what are the distractions? Well, as Ahson mentioned, you're going to see a prospect at a major bank. Now you have to do some research, right? So what typically happens is they'll either do a quick cursory type of research or they'll do none and they'll just show up. That's one scenario. So wouldn't it be nice to be able to have that research at your fingertips? Really good research, really quickly. Another scenario, you need a PowerPoint. Well, you could use a standard PowerPoint. That'll save you time, but it's likely going to be less impactful. So an ideally impactful PowerPoint, which would be one that's tailored. Wouldn't it be nice to have the time or the resources or the ability to do that? But if you as the rep, sales rep, business development rep, use your term of choice, you now have to sit down and create that. Who the heck has time? You have to make trade-off decisions. Am I going to spend the rest of this afternoon creating this awesome deck? Many salespeople I know will do that. Others will say, hey, the hell with that. I'll tweak the other one. I want to get to another couple of meetings. So what I see here is the breakthrough is, and again, think of core competency. I'm a deal guy. So what I want to do in this scenario is the more time I spend in front of people, or heaven forbid on another damn Zoom call or on another phone call, whatever it is, or having a meeting or lunch or whatever it is, playing golf, the more I get to do that, the better. This is the breakthrough. So you're not going to get sidetracked spending hours of PowerPoints, hours of research. What happens if you need to create a proposal? What if you need to modify all sorts of other documents, right? You have that. So what you have here in essence is, oh, and by the way, the majority of the sales reps don't have the resources. In the ideal world, you have two assistants. Wouldn't that be awesome, right? One specializes in this, one specializes in that, and they're at your beck and call, including what type of designer coffee you like. That's awesome. None of us have that anymore. It's all do it yourself, no matter how much of a player you are in the company, no matter how big the company, very few people have the resources. So what you have here now is with ChatGPT is the ability and related tools, the ability to create the ultimate awesome bionic sales assistant, do my research, create the proposal, help me with this PowerPoint, um, help craft out give me a sense of the total addressable market. All those things that get to be done, high speed, low cost, etc. And one other thing, if I may. So if you go back, I don't know, make it up, 15 years, 20 years, so many companies said, I know how to increase sales output from all these damn salespeople. Let's invest in a CRM. Let's spend $100,000 or 200 grand on Salesforce.com or some of these other CRMs. Very, very, very expensive. Guess what? That's for the boss. That's not really for the salespeople. I'll get some people mad at me right now. But at the end of the day, that's just more work for the damn salesperson to show up at the meeting and where are you? What percentage? Blah, 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 blah. That's more torture for the average salespeople. For the salespeople that are on this session, you're welcome. So here's the thing: why not have have a bot, have a software do it, right? Once a week, once a day, take this, organize the fine way, jam it in there so the boss is happy, and you show up. You know, you're all cool in the gang, ready to go. You're not like doing this manual stuff that's torture that forces you to free up another couple of hours a day before a sales meeting to get all that stuff in. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think so. I think, I think what you're saying is there's really value in that kind of co-pilot thing, that co-pilot idea, that assistant idea. I'm seeing a lot of value in, not maybe the yes, the manager stuff, but also, how to manage a sales team. I was at a customer experience conference last week and they were talking about it from a CX standpoint, but they're able to do with analytics now and see what's the top 1% now of my agents. What are they doing right? What are they doing wrong? What's the real-time feedback of what's happening on those calls? And so now, not only can I figure out who my top, we always talk about the 80-20 in sales, right, Frank? Now you can kind of see what the 80-20 is and try to do more of it, right? Instead of, doing what's not working. And then I think, the point you made, Ahson, around kind of the, I'll call it kind of the funnel thing, right? Improving conversion based on maybe analytics that AI can give you. And the other piece you touched on is around personalization, right? I think, one of the things that, we're using it a lot for on our network is better targeting, better focusing, better personalization to whatever segment you're selling to. Yeah.
I think that's right on. I mean, look, just one other thing I'll add to the thread of conversation here, as you kind of outlined here, Dan and Frank, some of your comments. I think a good way to look at this, I like how you've laid it out. It's really like saying, look, you've got your sales team member, and you've got access to, let's say, 5 Ivy League grads that are college interns, right? I mean, they'll do everything for you. They'll work 24 hours, and they've got access to anything on the internet that was ever created. Right? They may not know your internal CRM platform. That's the private data side that I was talking about earlier in the conversation. They don't sleep. They don't need to take breaks. They'll work 24/7. They'll even order you coffee, but it's just electronic. They won't go to the store to get, right? I mean, it's an Uber Eats delivery. But I think looking at it from that perspective, I think there's a tremendous amount of value. The follow-ups, the ongoing, the stuff that you kind of lose sight of to say, well, I got to go close this big deal. I got to, maybe I'll come back to chasing those leads and making sure that there's still active interest. A lot of that can be automated away as well, right? So momentum, engagement, customized follow-ups that seem like personalized notes but aren't really written by humans. That's where a lot of this value is going to come from day one. Now, as you start looking at the quarterback concept, I'm sure you guys have played with Auto GPT. I see Auto GPT as kind of the gateway to generalized AI, right? Which is really going to get to where it's that quarterback idea precisely, which is it can store data, it can access the internet, it can make temporary scratchpad files for you, something you can't do with Chat GPT right now. But I think the Auto GPT styled implementation of these capabilities in generative AI is ultimately what's going to lead to generalized AI and also some of the broader enterprise implementations as well.
And again, Jan, just put a finer point. I agree, my friend. And Dan, just put a finer point on just presence. If you as a salesperson could be on the phone or in front of twice as many prospects each week, you will make at least twice the money. That's the simple math as I see it. And by this freeing you up and having the scenario that Ahson described, you have 3 kick-ass Ivy League, maybe even beyond grads. They have a couple of years experience supporting in another job, supporting another high maintenance salesperson, like one of us. So deal guys, right? So they know, get this, right? Create this, craft this, draft this, get it. So that's what you have. And more so, comparing this to traditional, let's say, time must be flying. We're talking about traditional AI, right? But my joke when I would, all due respect to my friends formerly at IBM Watson, but everything there was 4 years of $4 million. And that's with no promise, right? So that was beyond the reach or beyond the attractiveness of, I would say, 90% of all companies, small, medium, and large, meaning right into the Fortune 500 land. If Ahson and I, listen, I play the role of deal guy, advisor guy, trend spotter. If Ahson and I walked into any one of our contacts, even people that knew us and loved us and said, hey, we have this idea, it's gonna be $4 million and I need 4 years, to hold me to it. I mean, as good as we are, we're going to lose most of those deals. You show up now and just say, listen, this thing is really good. It's really inexpensive. We just got to get some guardrails around it. But we could start here. Here's kind of high impact, low risk, and people see stuff happening literally within 30 days, and there's no millions and millions. Now you're off and running. Someone a couple of months ago said this is AI's iPhone moment. Yeah. And I think that nets it out. It's just so it puts this powerful tool in front of, in everyone's hand. Now, one other thing I will say, again, for those who have been old enough to be around, if you think about, now I'm thinking about kind of in the enterprise, right? So I'm helping a handful of enterprises as well as some startup guys right now, as well as people with ideas like, hey, I have a great idea for an app, right? So, but if you're dealing with the enterprise, the leaders that I'm talking to now fear, rightfully so, they fear the grassroots nature of this because, they want to avoid what happened back in the early days with PCs and then laptops and then mobile phones, and then where everybody just starts bringing in their device of choice, and there's all sorts of rogue development going on. And it happened in the earlier days, even with cloud and SaaS apps, where people could do an end run around IT, or the finance guys just put stuff on their credit card. So you're going to see a ton of those issues, I think, challenges in the corporate world, where all these kind of homegrown mini apps kind of pop up, and regardless of how effective they are or not, they create a lot of stress and anxiety around those in charge. Do you agree with that, Ahson?
I do, and I think, look, a lot of what you're talking about is, it's really from a sales perspective. It's about, look, we all get the robocalls, right? This is not about generative AI launching a million robocalls, every 24 hours, right? That's just going to go in absolutely the wrong direction, right? But whenever it is that you have gotten a cold call, personally, all of us as consumers, and we have responded well, when does that happen? Well, it's usually when there has been a propensity to buy, moment in time, and you're spoken to and communicated with in a way in which you like to be communicated with. Personalization points on 2 dimensions, right? One is temporal. Temporally, how do you know which is the moment in time where you've got a heightened propensity to buy? And then are you reaching the contact in a way in which and communicating with them in a way that they want to be reached out to? So somebody bought a house, and maybe that's the right time within the next 2 to 4 weeks to call them up and sell them appliance insurance, right? Or somebody's running a marathon, they come back and then you're renewing a policy, and that you've got a signal that this person's a marathon runner. So, hey, by the way, we can add on marathon insurance, which is extra coverage while something happens when you're running a marathon, right? So understanding moments in time to sell temporally, that's a critical thing. And then the outreach That's going to be a game changer by itself. And companies that figure that out are going to do really well from that respect. And then the style of communication, voice or email or channel, that's basic, but the language that's used as well, right? Which is also another concept. And as you train up junior sales team members, as you bring in people, the whisper agent idea to say, hey, sales guy or sales gal, make sure you do X, Y, and Z when you deal with this customer, because that's been their pattern of buying in the past, right? So those things, I think, practical implementation, and these are not, the AI taking over the world type conversation. These are about nuanced applications that are going to be little things, when you stitch them all together, are going to have a huge order of magnitude impact.
Frank, any final thoughts or advice for those watching and kind of half anxious, half excited about what's going on here from a sales standpoint?
Well, from a sales standpoint, it's all good. It's pretty straightforward. I would say if you're an independent rep, dive in, get to understand this, speak to people that are enthusiastically in the game, like Ahson and myself, and there are others out there, and build your perfect app, if you will, or if you need people to do it for you, see me or Ahson or other people you may know to help you get there. If you're a sales rep for a bigger company, then check the policy. The policy is probably you can't go off on your own and do this. And then you want to, get with the powers that be, help them understand it, and help them to quickly get to the point where they could, you could build something that everybody's comfortable with, addressing all the challenges of, IP and hacking and all the other things. Get that figured out. It's doable. It's very much doable, and get in the game. And then just think of the math. Twice the calls, so twice the meetings is twice the income. That is as exciting as that is for you. It should be for your boss and for the investors in your company. So, I would say giddy up and get going.
Ahson, any final thoughts from your perspective? What are you telling your teams right now?
Look, I think it's about understanding the before we get into CRM integration and automating the sales process. I'll share two thoughts with everybody here. I read this book a few months, almost a year and a half ago, growth hacking, right? And and going through it, there's nothing in here there's a lot of great insights, but there isn't one thing that really jumped out at me that was kind of the game changer is think of your best sales rep, guy or gal, what they do, how they do it, and then automate all that away through process, right? As much as you can, your email, your autoresponders, your how you engage with them on the chat channel. Every time they touch your organization for your product or service, think about your best sales rep, what they do, how they do it, and put that away. This book was written in 2016. I'll look that up before we jump on this call for that reason. And a lot of that is possible. That a lot of that was reactive. You could automate once the customer reaches out to you. Now you can automate that away and reach and automate the outreach. That's number one. Number two, if you're not doing it already, you got to start doing it. Use Chat GPT as a way to do some basic analysis and research. If you want to be, there's some limitations because Chat GPT, the available version through the chat window only goes up to 2021, 2022. If you want to look at things that are more current, look at AutoGPT, implementations of AutoGPT that can actually go out and look at the internet and more current data. ChatGPT is just a chat interface, and the only thing you can talk to is the model and what the model's been trained on. But if you want to access and analyze what is out there in the open internet, I think AutoGPT can be a lot more useful now. That'll sharpen your ability to write prompts because you need to give that college grad a lot of specific instructions to produce the kind of content that's going to be meaningful. Models have a tendency to hallucinate. But understanding that implementation that can use the internet in a way in which, or publicly available data, multiple data sets, I think AutoGPT styled interfaces for research, absolutely something worth looking into to drive customer research. Look at 10Ks, 10Qs, last earnings calls. You can direct the models to look at those things and give you insights, which, kind of what Frank was talking about. You've got these college interns now. How do you direct them to sources of data that are going to prove value in your initial interactions with customers? So optimizing and automating some of that initial call research or follow-on call discussions, absolutely something that I think everybody should be looking at from a sales perspective.
Great. Ahson, thanks so much for joining us, Frank. As always, appreciate it. We'll be back in 2 weeks, Frank and I, with Automation Nation sales strategies. We're going to do the first and third Friday of every month. So check us out. We'll send the invitations to you shortly for the next one. In the meantime, if you're looking for help with sales, marketing, or interested in our new client member matchmaking service, check out IRPAAI.com/matchmaking. Thanks for joining, everybody, and have a great weekend.